Coogs house. The college football playoff rankings are out, and Houston is in the top 25.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day, making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. If you're into the conversation and you don't know what to say, the last thing I read saw Houston go into the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So tell us in the comments down below if you like your Pop-Tarts hot or cold. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, the best place to get on the action and the sportsbook partner of the NBA. We'll get more on that fun later, but best place to get in on the action is over at FanDuel. Now, I want to talk about those college football playoff rankings at the start of the show today. That's the first segment. I want to jump into flip season and college football playoff recruiting, I guess, across the college football playoff landscape and how college football recruiting is giving a lot of flips this current flip season as signing day and signing periods are coming and going. I also want to talk some in the last segment about Kingston Flemings and the awards he's already racking up as a Houston Cougar. But first, foremost, we got to start with Houston being in the college football playoff ranking for the first time since 2021. They ended that season in the top 20 and exactly 20th after getting to go to the Birmingham Bowl and beating Auburn there. A pretty strong season. They went 12-2 that year. And honestly, Houston's got a great shot to go 12-2 again, I guess be 11-2 this year, potentially as well. The idea of getting to the Big 12 championship game feels like a long stretch at this point, but you could easily win the next two games and then pull off a bowl win to get to that 11-win marker. We'll see how far they climb. This is a big deal for the program, and I want to talk about that in a second. I would point out, though, that the Big 12 did get 5 teams in the college football playoff here. Texas Tech led the way at number 5 overall. BYU and Utah are at 11 and 12, which feels like they're in the top 12 for the college football playoff. However, when you factor in automatic qualifiers, being the 5 conference champions, you're actually going to have the ACC champion in there somewhere because the ACC has no team in the top 12, and then a group of 5 champion in there somewhere because there's no group of 5 team in the top 12. And so actually Utah and BYU in their 12 and 11 respectively are the first 2 teams out. But that's 3 teams in the Big 12, Houston at 23 and Arizona State, who Houston beat, at 25. That's a ranked win, folks. Ranked win. Now, as I look at Houston in this one, I think, frankly, in a specific to Houston spot, year 2, Willie Fritz, the roller coaster. I mean, it has been mostly up, but also somewhat of a roller coaster this season. You got the gigantic recruiting class coming in, which we'll talk more about in the second segment, right? All of that is to say, 23 at this point in the rebuild feels fantastic. I would not be super. If you told me back in July that in mid-November you'd be 23rd in the college football playoff rankings and 8-2, I'd have had zero problems with that. I'd have been elated at that. And I think that that's an important perspective to keep here as you're looking at this. Now, could I go on and on about, like, well, who has Georgia Tech beaten or who has Illinois? I could go and pick through each and every team's in front of Houston's resume and point out to you, like, Alabama sitting at 10 with a loss to an unranked Florida State or whatever, right? Like, sure, I could go through and do all that, and there'd be wins and losses. And what's interesting is it feels like, in hearing from the playoff committee, as things have shifted a little bit, that it sounds like quality losses are fairly heavily weighted here, which is a weird thing to see play out. The Big 12, though, for the future of Houston, I think is an interesting thing to keep an eye on, probably more importantly, because we're looking forward. This is a forward-thinking, positive podcast. That's where we're going. And Houston, again, with the momentum they're building, the stretch of time. I mean, Willie Fritz got Tulane ranked so much so that they're a program that is still in the top 25. Not, I guess, still. They took breaks here and there, but was in the top 25 a lot of his last couple of years there. Got as high as 9th after that big win over USC. Uh, they're top 24 right now, and you could argue that it's a program he built that Summerall came in and took over, and now Summerall sounds like he may be heading to Auburn, right? So like things keep on building there based on how strong it was when he left it. So Houston, you can assume, will project to continue to climb these things long term. And that's why I think it's important to look at where the Big 12 is in this. Yes, Texas Tech, they have one loss to Arizona State, who is in the top 25 right now, presently. And that loss was without their starting quarterback. I do think they're qualifying those kinds of things in these days in the college football playoff. Not just what we heard about Florida State a couple of years ago, but also as you look across, like Oklahoma didn't have a fully healthy John Mateer in their loss. Like they're not super dinged there or whatever, right? But what's interesting is like as you look at this number 7, Oregon does not have a great win, but they don't have bad losses. Or BYU has the one loss to number 5 Texas Tech, or Utah's 2 losses are to BYU and Texas Tech. Notre Dame has 2 ranked losses, so they sit at number 9. One of those ranked losses is Miami, who sits at 13 because they have 2 unranked losses, even though that they are one of the top 10's ranked losses. That spinning and spiraling is interesting because that does absolutely feel like favoritism here. It is not lost on me that BYU and Utah are at 11 and 12, and I can't remember for the life of me because I just tried to remember it now. There was a year in a 14 playoff where Baylor and TCU like co-won the Big 12, and they didn't get into the four. Neither one of them got into the 14 playoff. It was like a round robin Big 12 year back whenever that happened. I wasn't paying super close attention, but I remember that being the discussion, right? The Big 12 getting left out because they were couldn't pick between them. It feels like BYU and Utah are doing that right now at 11 and 12 with plenty of chaos left to ensue. You got the Egg Bowl with Ole Miss and their whole coaching situation. A&M's got to go to Austin and play Texas. Georgia Tech could be chaos. Auburn is like living on the idea of beating Alabama and ruining their year. Like all of those things could happen up at the front. And when was the last time Ohio State beat Michigan? They're number 1 overall. But like when was the last time Ohio State beat Michigan? Right. So I guess those are all things happening too. The Big 12, though, getting the one team for sure in and 2 teams at the edge as Houston looks to get into that echelon. Houston's the 4th highest ranked Big 12 team right now, right? Houston is at that's like top of the next tier of the conference. And so you got to hope that like the next logical progression is to get into the top tier of the like that's the next step, right? And so what the country is doing with that tier, it feels like is getting shafted to the side here. And again, that may be different when you're Houston with an electric guy like Keyshawn Henderson or what Paris Melvin at receiver. You have all these different guys coming in, and the transport class is going to be great, and all that stuff happen. Yes, you could absolutely have Houston in a different spot from a vibes perspective than BYU, who played a bunch of, cream puffy kind of feeling teams early, or Utah, who has beaten the brakes off of people in their wins, but taken some bad losses. No bad losses to good teams, but bad losses, right? And so I could see how Houston may differentiate themselves if they were in that tier soon, but that is where you're looking at, and it does not seem like it's a great look right now. However, I would point out that if Tech, BYU, Utah get opportunities to play college football playoff games and win, that may help Houston as well. I also think that if it plays out like it presently is, and everyone wins out in the Big 12 that they're supposed to, or the favorites win out, I should say, Tech and BYU would meet again in Arlington for the Big 12 Conference Championship game. If BYU keeps a close game there and shows progress, that may catapult them in. Their only 2 losses would be to a top 4 or 5 team, and they would have gotten better between them. That may be good enough. If they were to beat Tech and be the conference champion, I don't know if Tech would fall with it would be a second loss, and this would be a healthy loss or a healthy quarterback loss, but would it fall enough to fall out of the top 10 or 12 and ultimately BYU would secure a spot? That I think it's kind of shifty, and I'm sure we'll talk about it throughout the season, the rest of the season. But if the teams in the playoffs that happen from the Big 12 do represent it well, that's the thing you are rooting for to happen as a Houston fan because 2026, 7, 8, as this thing continues to build, you're looking to be knocking on that door and hopefully breaking it down in the near future. And so that's like where you're trying to keep an eye on this. Do I think this Notre Dame Miami thing is extra screwy? Yes. It is weird to me that because we're valuing good losses, for whatever reason that may be, Notre Dame's loss to Miami is a good enough loss to keep them in the top 10, but Miami's win over Notre Dame is not a good enough win to get them into the top 10. From a distance, a long way away distance, if I'm Houston, that worries me. I wonder, does that mean it's more beneficial to schedule the crazy tough non-conference to start the year in weeks 1 and 2 like Notre Dame did? You can go 0-2 apparently and still be okay if you schedule a bunch of cream puffs after that, because that's kind of what Notre Dame did. Or is it not? Should you be pushing to go undefeated one loss akin to what Oregon did up there at 7? That is setting up interesting scheduling conversations as well. Whatever the case may be, Houston comes in at 23, and while the future seems interesting, the present seems grand. And I'm going to talk about the present as well in the next segment, where Houston pulls a flip in a big kind of way. But first, let's get to our buddies over at FanDuel, because the NBA is back. The Rockets are good, and there's no better place to get in on the action with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Head to FanDuel.com, sign up, play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Park Rangers locked on Coogs here. And Houston football got some good news in terms of pulling in a defensive line commit. Isaiah Broughton of Cy Ridge High School in the Houston area commits to Houston in a flip from UNLV. Now, Broughton had been committed to UNLV for a while now. He's 6'4", 315, big, strong frame. His older brother, Vernon, played at Cy Ridge High School as well, but then went to Texas and then ultimately now plays with the New Orleans Saints. I believe still with New Orleans Saints. And Broughton had been a UNLV commitment, but had garnered a bunch of interest from big time programs the last few months. Uh, he had interest from Auburn, Oklahoma State. His big interests were also from his more recent top three included Florida and Miami, and ultimately Houston, where he picked to go. And I interestingly think that if you follow this recruiting trend, it looks like to me, um, proximity to home, I think played a big role. I'm not going to beat around the bush there. The kid has said he wants to play in front of his family. His family is in Houston. That's a no-brainer, right? But where it gets interesting to me as well is that the family on campus is perhaps best intact at Houston out of those options. Florida and Auburn, Oklahoma State have moved on from their coaches and are changing up coaching staffs. And while Auburn, Oklahoma State may have a name very, very soon, it sounds like, as far as who their next guy is, they don't have one right now. There's a lot of influx there. What's happening, right? Florida, same thing, although they were in his top three. I do think he did like his visit there and those kind of things. But coaching staff turnover, right? And then Miami, I guess Cristobal has not been fired, but I do think there's enough unrest at Miami that it's not inconceivable that Cristobal would not last all of Isaiah's tenure there as a defensive lineman, right? Like he wouldn't. Things have to change for Cristobal to be there long term, longer than Isaiah Broughton is. So when you look at all those options, and Houston is on the up and up. Willie Fritz just got here. They just got ranked. They got the great 2026 class coming in, come be a part of this. All those things move forward. That I think makes it a very positive flip. Then ultimately, he's flipping out of the UNLV commitment into a Power 4 commitment, playing a much higher level of football. That was consistent across all 5 of his options here. And those relationships, the proximity to home, all of that I think factored in. I think this is a home run for Houston. a big, strong, local kid, local ties, all of that. I also think it's important, and I didn't just bring that up on a whim earlier, that his brother was a big time recruit as well from the Houston area and is now an NFL football player. He has seen the life of high major college football. He has seen a life of what it takes to get to the NFL. And it's not quite the like you draft a son of a pro for your basketball team kind of thing or whatever. But I do think there's something to it where a guy that understands and has, someone in his circle and like his brother, right? Someone that he can talk to on a daily basis, like, hey, what does it take? What does it look like? What do I need to be doing? Right? Like having that personal relationship with someone at that level of football is important. And he's not the only kid at Houston or being recruited in this class even like that. But I do think that it is important to have that in this guy's circle. I think it's going to lead to stronger development. And I think that makes this high end 3-star. Like if you look at the numbers, it's like almost a 4-star, high end 3-star kind of kid. Could be a 4-star, frankly, by the time things settle out. Um, I think it's important to see that, frankly, pause. I would notice, I bet if he'd committed to Florida, he'd become a 4-star. Can I say that all? I think if he'd gone to Florida to be a 4-star. Instead, he's a highly touted 3-star coming to Houston, and he's going to, frankly, be better because the program's in a much better spot. And anyway, and I think that having all that in your corner helps. Now, it is notably flip season. What I mean by that, it is the signing period, the early side. There's a bunch of coaching chaos and turnover in the month of November. There's already been a bajillion coaches fired, it feels like. Who knows who's going to be hired where? Um, it hit the internet that it sounds like Summerall's going to get the uh, Auburn job, but then who gets the Tulane job, then who gets the LSU job, then who gets da da da. There was talk about does Dillingham leave Arizona State? Sounds like Levitt might. All that, right? But what that also means is that these teenage kids in high school, they haven't signed the name to that dotted line yet. They may be changing where they sign that paper and sending it off to. Um, I got a random text about a kid. Someone I think so and so is going to decommit. I think so and so is going to flip. I think so, and I don't want to breathe air into that by putting names and stuff out there. I don't think that helps. What I will say is, it is totally normal and natural for that to be A, rumored, and B, happen. It does not mean this coaching staff is not doing a good job by any stretch if some kid flips out. Now, are some kids more valuable than others in that process? Sure. That is not an indictment on this staff or something because a kid flips out to a big money or blue bloody feeling program, right? That's just not how that works. This is a very normal thing that happens to any school recruiting these 4 and 5-star caliber kids, right? That's part of the game, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game. Second, and this is more of a fair warning, and I mean like scold people on their fandom or whatever, but it's important for the school, the staff, and I would argue the fans too, to maintain positive relationships, even if a kid does flip. In modern college football, modern college sports, but specifically football, a kid going somewhere else right now, commitment, flipping, whatever, does not mean you've lost out on them forever. When you look at Willie Fritz's roster, how many of those kids are kids that transferred in here to come back home because they knew Fritz from an earlier spot in his travels, or they knew someone on the staff from an earlier part in their travels, right? It is totally conceivable that a kid could commit somewhere else, flip to somewhere else, whatever, in the next week or 10 days, and ultimately end up playing their freshman or the redshirt freshman, their sophomore year, whatever, at Houston. We saw, what was the Tech kid's name? The receiver that like went to Tech, did spring ball at A&M, and then went back to Tech. These things happen, right? Now that's obviously faster than it's allowed to happen now, but these things happen. If there's a large decommitment or whatever from Houston in the next few days as Flip's season goes on, take it, wear it, cheer on the guys that stay, cheer on the guys that go. I think that the key players here are staying, so I think we're okay there. And I think that the guys that you're losing, the one text I got about a guy that might leave, if it happens, and we roll, right? Again, he's not any worse a kid or football player by any stretch because of it. And if he changes his mind later and wants to come to Houston, Come on, right? Now, I would point out one thing in all of this. It is easy, I think, in modern college football to assume this is always a money thing. Oh, that kid just wants the money. That kid just wants the big bag. And well, I don't want to act like that's not a part of it. It's often a smaller part of it, I think, to the actual players themselves than the fans want to make it out to be, right? It's the most tangible part of it. So I think it's easy. Oh, it's a number. This number is bigger than that number. That's why they picked like that's just not the way things always work. Now, one thing that does seem to always work, or at least 4 games in Houston's basketball season seems to always work, is giving the ball to that Kingston Flemings kid. And people are starting to notice. And that's pretty freaking cool. We'll talk about that 1 second. Before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. Best place to get laptops, lowest price guaranteed. College football is near the end of the season. You're running out of games to go to. If you're trying to get into the action, getting tickets can be the most treacherous part. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping. That's why I use Game Time. That's why Locked On uses Game Time. The app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Easy way to score. Last tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. If you pull up Game Time right now and get a TCU game this weekend really reasonably, I have challenged Houston fans to also go to the Baylor game a week afterwards in Waco. Tickets are really cheap there as well. Both of these might be games that fire their coach. The other team fires their coach afterwards. It is an interesting spot to be in for Houston. You can get in the spots with the Cougars as well. You want NBA tickets, concert tickets, Cougar basketball tickets, whatever you want. Game Time has it. You can toggle switches, see exactly what you're going to pay at checkout. It's the best place to get in. The zone deals, like a zone deal. Say, I want to sit in roughly this part of the stadium. They find the best deal in that part. All the work gets done for you. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. The terms apply. Again, that's code Locked On College. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Park Ainsworth Locked on Coogs here. And can I say Locked on Coogs favorite? Certainly I can say former Locked on Coogs guest. Kingston Flemings. We're still basking in the glory that was last Sunday. His 22-point performance over and a win over Auburn. Tremendous defense down the stretch. And while he did look like a freshman to me at several points, it did not feel like freshman basketball for many stretches of that game. Dominated that game in so many ways. And the nation took notice. Thus far, we are at recording at the end of the day Tuesday. He has earned Oscar Robertson National Player of the Week, Lute Olson National Player of the Week, the Field 68 National Player of the Week, Big 12 Conference from the conference itself Player of the Week, the Big 12 Conference Freshman of the Week. And interestingly, look, he and Chris Sinak, 18 points in the big man there, combined for 40 as 2 freshmen against Auburn, a top 20 team, and a top 25 team. And I would argue that they're probably really somewhere between 10 and 25 because when they changed coaches before that, people were projecting them to be in the top 10. And so the roster talent people had much higher. Obviously, coaching team, anyway, really good Auburn team. And those 2 freshmen led the way in Birmingham to beat that Auburn team, right? And it feels like a cool thing. It's cool to see the whole nation watching Kingston. And I don't mean this in a way that belittles any other path because Houston has accelerated as ascended as a basketball program where they're looking at kids from every aspect of basketball. They were in on recruiting a G League kid. They're in on academy kids. They're looking at international kids. They hit the portal for guys like Milos. They hit every angle, right? There's something nostalgic, however, about a 6A public high school basketball kid he's from San Antonio. He's not quite Houston, but it's close. There was just a big time basketball player there I stayed at the same high school the whole time, made deep runs in state playoff, the UIL state playoffs that we all knew, like all of that led to Kingston. And frankly, I argued on this program, and I would argue again if anyone asked me about it. Him playing in UIL, him playing on the Puma circuit showed a loyalty that is commendable and ultimately probably led to snubbing of sorts from things like McDonald's All Americans or whatever, right? It's bogus. He was one of the best anyway, it was bogus. It also probably led to him being the third ranked recruit in Houston's recruiting class. No, it was an incredible recruiting class, but most people had him third of the three with he, Isaiah, and Chris, and then Bryce Jackson being back at fourth, a little bit ways behind them. Although I always point out Bryce had a very injury-ridden high school career. Things have been different. And so Kingston has weathered that, been very humble in that, and just he's just an incredible. He's a wise kid through all of that, right? And then it gets to Houston. It's like, oh wait, this dude can go. He can play. He plays at a different speed and pace. It's interesting because he plays at such a fast speed, but he never feels sped up, right? And I think that's an important thing for a point guard to have. And so Kingston is being Kingston, and he's got the whole country watching, and it's a cool thing. Again, I said nostalgic earlier to see that path with this big spotlight on it in a world where kids play at four different high schools for four different AAU programs and do national circuits on the EYBL Scholastic. That's obviously a very successful path. Houston has other kids on their roster that did that path. I don't mean that's not a good path, but the nostalgia of he played for the local nearby high school, got them far in the state playoffs every year, put Brennan on the map in many ways, and now he's got the whole world realizing, oh, there's still some baller players in that neck of the woods as well. Now, he won all those awards, and I thought it was very Samsonian. That when asked about it, Sampson said that Kingston and Chris both combined for 40 points against Auburn. He said, quote, they'd better come to practice today, Tuesday, like they accomplished nothing. And to be fair, to be absolutely positively fair, reports at a practice on Tuesday were that Kingston Flemings, and going after a ball, tripped over someone's foot and fell on the hardwood and cut open his chin. Had to go get stitches. Now he'll be fine by Thursday's game. But doesn't sound like they came in too full of themselves by any stretch of the imagination. The kid is a truly incredible worker, and obviously think the world of him. I think the world of Chris. Chris is a fantastic, and Isaiah. It's a great program. As Samson has said before, he does not recruit problems he don't want to have. So he only recruits great kids, and it's just cool to see the whole world seeing it with a spotlight on it. It's pretty great. Now, as far as Ryder this Thursday goes, we'll do more in depth on them tomorrow. Things you need to know on them ahead of time, though, is they play an incredibly slow pace. They played two Power 4 opponents already, two Power 5 opponents in basketball, I guess, opponents already in Virginia and Rutgers, got blown out in both of those. But what I see that happening in this one is a focus that could honestly make Houston look a little slow at parts, is a focus on getting the vets back involved in the offense. Milos, Emmanuel, and JoJo made the top 50 Wooden Award watch list after the past weekend. And honestly, not because I care if they win that award. I want them to win the awards, but they don't have to win or anything like that. Just to make sure this team is clicking, those guys need to kind of get back in the flow. And this is a chance to really work through those things. So it'll be interesting to see. Like Kingston will be the fastest player on the floor on Thursday night. I don't think they're going to use him quite like that, though. Right. So we'll see how those things go when we get there. We'll do all that and more at Locked on Coogs each and every day. Football news, basketball commitments, football flips, all those kinds of things happening throughout the week. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we go live. Locked on Coogs, primarily the Locked on Podcast Network. That's the number one sports podcast network in the world, and it means your team every day. Go Coogs.